Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The battlefield was not on fire the way stories always promised. It hummed instead, a low vibrating sound that crawled through bones and teeth, caused by overlapping gravity fields struggling to decide which way down was supposed to be. Broken drones drifted like confused insects. Somewhere far above, capital ships exchanged light so bright it felt impolite to look at, as if the universe itself were arguing too loudly. He was not supposed to be there. That was already the first mistake. The second mistake happened when his boot nudged something soft. He froze, slowly looked down, and saw a woman staring up at him with wide, furious eyes. She looked human enough that his brain tried to relax, same shape, same proportions. But then it noticed the ears. Long, elegant, tapering backward, twitching slightly as if they had opinions of their own. Blood darkened the pale fabric at her side, floating lazily in the unstable gravity. They stared at each other for a long second. Then she spoke, her voice sharp despite the pain, filtered through a damaged translator unit clipped to her collar. "If you're going to kill me," she said, "please do it quickly. I'm having an exhausting day." He laughed. It burst out of him before he could stop it, a short, hysterical sound that surprised them both. "Yeah," he said, crouching without thinking, "same. I was supposed to be dead 3 hours ago." Her hand twitched toward a weapon that was no longer there. He raised his palms. "Relax. If I wanted to shoot you, I wouldn't be talking. Talking is usually the warning sign." She frowned. "Your species has very strange customs. Tell me about it." He glanced around. Sensors screamed in his helmet about incoming patrols, hostile signatures, friendly signatures, signatures that made no sense at all. He should have walked away, he knew that. Instead, he pointed at her wound. "That looks bad." She followed his gaze, snorted weakly. "That is because it is." He dug into his pack, hands shaking, pulling out a universal med patch he had been saving for himself. "Don't read into this," he muttered. "I'm not having a moral awakening, I just hate waste." Her long ears tilted in a way that suggested disbelief. "You are wasting your life on me." "That's possible," he said, slapping the patch into place. It hissed and sealed, nanofibers knitting flesh while the gravity field flickered again, sending both of them drifting a few centimeters upward. "But I've made worse investments." She winced, then stared at him as sensation returned. "Why?" He paused. The honest answer was complicated, tangled with exhaustion and fear and a sudden, irrational need for the universe to make sense. So he shrugged. "Because if this war needs me to step on you to keep going, then the war can wait." Somewhere above them, another explosion rippled silently through space. She studied his face as if trying to memorize it, or maybe trying to decide whether humans were all this stupid. When footsteps echoed closer, he cursed softly. "Okay, new plan, you stay quiet. I pretend I didn't see you. And later, when you're ruling the galaxy or something, you can remember I have a very punchable face." Despite everything, she smiled. He discovered very quickly that hiding a wounded alien woman during an active interstellar conflict required skills he did not possess. The med patch kept her alive, which was encouraging, but it also caused her to glow faintly blue every few seconds, which was less ideal. He tried adjusting the frequency, whispering to the device like it could hear embarrassment, but it continued pulsing cheerfully, as if proud of its work. "You are terrible at this," she said, watching him fumble with a portable shield generator. "I was trained to run, shoot, and complain," he replied. "This is advanced-level incompetence." They had wedged themselves into the hollow shell of a crashed transport pod. The gravity inside shifted every few minutes, making their bodies slide an inch to the left or float slightly upward, then settle again. Each shift earned a hiss from her and a muttered apology from him. Outside, boots passed close enough that he could hear the soft clink of armor plates and the faint crackle of comms traffic in languages neither of them trusted. Her translator stuttered occasionally, replacing words with strange approximations. At one point she tried to insult his intelligence and instead called him a malfunctioning comfort mammal. He grinned. "I'm putting that on my resume." She studied him more closely now, no longer trying to hide the way her long ears angled toward his voice. "You should leave," she said. "Your people will not forgive this." "My people barely forgive me for breathing," he said. "Besides, you're injured. Leaving you would be rude." "Rude," she repeated flatly. "We are at war." "Yes, but manners are universal, mostly." He handed her a ration bar. "It tastes like compressed regret, but it's nutritious." She sniffed it suspiciously. "If this poisons me, you'll haunt me as a very judgmental ghost. I accept the risk." She took a bite, grimaced, then took another. Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of distant engines and the pod's struggling systems. When the gravity flipped briefly, her shoulder bumped into his chest. They froze. Neither moved away immediately. "You are afraid," she said quietly. "Of you?" he asked. "Of choosing," she replied. He didn't have a joke ready for that, which felt unfair. "Yeah," he said after a moment, "I am." Her eyes softened, and for the first time the battlefield felt far away, like a badly tuned channel. Then his motion sensor pinged, sharp and insistent. "They're close," he whispered. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "Then listen carefully, human with the punchable face. If we survive this, we do not part as strangers." He smiled despite the fear tightening his chest. "Deal. But just so you know, this is officially the worst way I've ever made a friend." Outside, the war continued to argue with itself, loud and relentless, unaware that something fragile and dangerous was quietly taking shape in the wreckage. The evacuation signal came as a sound no one enjoyed, a rising harmonic tone that vibrated through metal and bone alike, announcing that something had gone terribly wrong in a very official way. The transport pod shuddered, lights flickering as if undecided about optimism. He looked at her and she already knew. "They are coming for me," she said, calm in the way only people with no choices left could be. "Yeah," he said. "That figures." The gravity snapped hard to one side, slamming him against the pod wall while she floated briefly, hair and long ears lifting as if underwater. He pushed himself upright, cursing, and checked his scanner. Multiple alien signatures closing fast, cutting through the chaos with purpose. Not patrols, retrieval. He felt an unexpected tightening in his chest, which annoyed him deeply. "You're not supposed to look relieved," he muttered. "I am not relieved," she said. "I am prepared." She hesitated, then added, "Those are different things. Our language has 6 words for this feeling. None of them are comforting." "That's efficient," he said weakly. The pod's hull screamed as a grappling beam locked on. Outside, space bent, colors stretching into strange ribbons as a jump corridor began to form. He knew what that meant. They had seconds. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small data chip, holding it up awkwardly. "Okay, this is going to sound ridiculous. This has my service ID, medical records, and a list of places I used to eat before the war ruined everything. If," he swallowed, "if this galaxy ever decides to be less stupid, maybe you'll want it." She stared at the chip as if it were something impossibly fragile. Slowly, she took it, fingers brushing his. Her ears tilted back, a gesture he didn't understand but somehow felt. "You are very bad at war," she said softly. "Everyone keeps saying that." The hull split open in a clean, precise line. Light flooded in, and with it, figures in sleek armor, their weapons lowered the instant they saw her. Voices filled the air, sharp and urgent, layered with relief. One of them glanced at him, surprise flickering across their alien features. She turned back once more before they pulled her away. "Human," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "You chose me." He forced a grin. "Don't get used to it, I'm terribly inconsistent." For a moment longer, their eyes held. Then the gravity snapped again, the beam retracted, and she was gone, swallowed by light and motion and war. The pod fell silent. Later, much later, he would tell the story as a joke. He would say he once saved an alien woman by accident and lost her on purpose. People would laugh, because it sounded safer that way. But alone, in the quiet that followed, he stared at the empty space where she had been and wondered when exactly a single choice became something permanent. Power arrived quietly, which surprised her. She had expected something louder, perhaps accompanied by fire or prophecy or at least an ominous choir. Instead, it came in the form of endless chambers, endless advisors, and a throne that was far less comfortable than it looked. The crown, ceremonial, light, irritatingly symbolic, itched behind her long ears, no matter how many times the attendants insisted it was perfectly balanced. She listened as planets argued through representatives made of holograms and pride. She listened as generals presented casualty projections with the enthusiasm of people discussing weather patterns. She listened so well that some of them forgot she was there at all, which she found useful. Empresses, she learned, were underestimated either as monsters or as ornaments. Both assumptions made governing easier. Yet in the quiet hours, when the palace dimmed and even the stars beyond the viewport seemed to lower their voices, her thoughts drifted backward, against time and logic, to a human with tired eyes and an unearned smile. Her advisors noticed, of course. They noticed everything and understood very little. One of them, ancient and perpetually alarmed, cleared his throat one cycle too many. "Your radiance," he said carefully. "Your interest in human behavioral records is extensive." She didn't look at him. "So is human incompetence. I find it educational." Another advisor leaned forward. "They are unpredictable. Emotion-driven, bad at war." She smiled faintly. "Yes, I've met one." The room went quiet in the way rooms did when history considered changing direction. Someone coughed. Someone else pretended to adjust a data slate that wasn't on. She allowed the silence to stretch, enjoying it perhaps a little too much. She had risen quickly after the war, faster than tradition preferred and faster than her enemies expected. Survival did that. Mercy, too, though no one liked to say it aloud. They preferred to call her strategic, calculating, ruthless when necessary. No one wrote official reports about the strange strength it took to remember a single life saved among billions lost. At night, she sometimes replayed the fragmentary recordings from the battlefield archive. They were distorted, half-corrupted by overlapping jump signatures, but one image remained stubbornly clear. A human crouched in wreckage, hands raised, trying to look brave while very clearly failing. She laughed softly, alone. "Terrible at war," she murmured. A diplomatic alert chimed, pulling her back to the present. A human delegation requested audience, wrapped in formal language and mutual suspicion. Her ears tilted slightly, an old reflex she hadn't quite trained out of herself. "Schedule it," she said, "and cancel my patience reserves. I may need them." As the stars shifted outside the palace, she felt the faint, familiar tension of choice returning. Years ago, a human had chosen her in a moment when the universe expected otherwise. Now the universe, infuriatingly persistent, seemed to be returning the favor. She leaned back on the throne that didn't fit her quite right and smiled to herself. Some debts, she knew now, survived wars, empires, and time itself. He had expected many unpleasant things when the diplomatic summons arrived. Invasive scans, long corridors designed to make visitors feel small, and at least one chair that was secretly a psychological weapon. He had not expected the silence. The palace swallowed sound. Even his boots seemed to apologize as they touched the floor. Light bent gently along curved walls, and gravity felt, polite, as if it had been tuned to avoid causing offense. He followed the escort drones, hands clasped behind his back, reminding himself that he was here as a civilian consultant, and absolutely not because he once made a catastrophically bad decision involving an alien woman and a med patch. The doors opened. The throne room was vast, but his attention narrowed instantly, painfully, to the figure seated at its center. She looked almost the same. Taller, perhaps, posture sharpened by authority, expression honed by years of people lying to her. The long ears were unmistakable, rising elegantly from her hair, adorned now with subtle markings that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent patterns. She was watching him with an intensity that made his internal organs consider retreat. He stopped walking. "Oh," he said. A ripple passed through the assembled court. Advisors shifted, guards stiffened. The Empress raised one slender hand and the room stilled like a paused breath. "You're late," she said. He blinked. "I got lost. Your gravity is judgmental." For a moment no one moved. Then she stood, descended the steps with deliberate slowness and stopped an arm's length from him. Up close her eyes were sharper, older, amused. "Years later," she said quietly, "I finally meet you again, and you open with a complaint." "Consistency is my strongest trait," he replied. "Second strongest is panic." A very improper sound escaped her before she could stop it. Laughter, soft, brief, and utterly scandalous. Several advisors looked like they might faint. She recovered quickly, eyes narrowing with something deeper beneath the humor. "Why did you save me, human?" she asked. "We were supposed to be enemies." He considered lying. He was very good at lying these days. Instead, he shrugged. "I was tired. The war didn't make sense anymore, and you looked like someone who didn't deserve to die in a pile of wreckage." Her ears tilted back, a familiar gesture that struck him harder than any accusation. "You chose poorly," she said. "Story of my life." They stood there, suspended between past and present, while the galaxy waited awkwardly around them. Finally she turned to the court. "Leave us." A pause, then obedience. When they were alone, the silence changed. It softened. "You look older," she said. "Occupational hazard," he replied. "You look terrifyingly important." She smiled. "I am." He met her gaze, something steadying in his chest at last. "So," he said, "did you ever rule the galaxy?" "Not yet," she replied. "But it appears I have found the human who once made that suggestion." Somewhere between them an old choice stirred, stubborn and alive, refusing to stay buried in history. They were not supposed to work well together. Every projection model said so. The simulations glitched when their names were placed on the same decision tree, producing warnings that translated loosely into "this is a bad idea asterisk." Naturally, those warnings were ignored. They sat across from each other at a curved strategy table, a holographic map of contested systems rotating slowly between them. Fleets shimmered in translucent light, supply lines pulsing like nervous veins. Every few seconds the map updated itself with new probabilities, as if even the software was anxious. "You're suggesting we bluff," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Against 3 hostile coalitions, with ships we don't fully control." "Yes," she replied calmly. "That's not a plan, that's a personality flaw." She tapped the table, zooming in on a choke point near a collapsed star corridor. "You underestimate the value of appearing unreasonable. Humans are excellent at it." He smiled. "We practice from childhood." Advisors hovered at the edges of the room, pretending not to listen while listening with professional desperation. Every so often, one would cough or make a meaningful noise, which she ignored with impressive skill. Her long ears angled toward the map, then subtly toward him, betraying where her attention truly rested. "Their fleets assume I will act like an empress," she continued. "Formal, predictable, bound by legacy. And instead," he said, "you brought me." "Yes." He glanced at the map again, then back at her. "Just so we're clear, if this explodes spectacularly, I will say I was kidnapped." "Accepted," she said. "I will say you were persuasive." They moved through the plan in careful layers, humor cushioning the sharper edges of risk. When a probability dipped dangerously low, he would make a joke. When an advisor panicked, she would raise an eyebrow until calm returned out of self-preservation. Slowly, against expectation, the numbers shifted. During a pause, she studied him. "You have changed." He shrugged. "I learned when to stop running toward gunfire, mostly." "You still run toward trouble," she said. "Only the interesting kind." A warning alert flared suddenly, red light slicing through the hologram, unauthorized fleet movement. The room tensed instantly. She did not look away from him. Do you trust me? He exhaled. I once trusted you with my life in a broken transport pod. This feels consistent. She nodded once, then issued commands that rippled across the stars. Fleets repositioned. Signals went silent. The galaxy held its breath. As the alert faded, an advisor whispered, "That worked." He grinned. "I hate to say it, but we might be good at this." She allowed herself a small smile. "Do not tell anyone." Between enemies pretending to be allies and allies pretending not to notice, something dangerous was taking shape again. Not war, but trust. And this time, the universe was watching closely. The ceasefire did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with silence, the kind that made people uneasy because it meant no one was shooting at anyone else. Across the contested systems, fleets powered down weapons they had never truly wanted to fire, and diplomats scrambled to pretend this had been the plan all along. He stood beside her at the observation window, watching stars drift calmly where explosions had once argued loudly. "So this is what saving the galaxy looks like," he said. "I expected more paperwork." She glanced at him, long ears relaxed for once. "There will be paperwork, I spared you." Truly merciful. The alliances held. The bluff became policy. The enemies who expected an empress of tradition instead found one who remembered what it felt like to bleed in wreckage and be helped by a stranger who made terrible jokes under pressure. Her advisors learned, slowly and painfully, that compassion could be weaponized far more effectively than fear. The final loose thread came quietly. A junior official arrived with a data slate, hands shaking. "The human is cleared," he said, as if expecting thunder. "All charges rescinded, full diplomatic immunity." He raised an eyebrow. "I knew kidnapping would pay off eventually." She smiled, then grew serious. "You can go," she said. "You are no longer bound to this court, or to me." He looked at her for a long moment, measuring the distance he had once crossed without thinking. "I know," he said, "but I'd like to stay, if that's not politically catastrophic." She considered this with exaggerated gravity. "It will cause several minor scandals," she said, "and one major tradition to collapse." "Sounds manageable." Later, when the galaxy had officially moved on, they sat alone again, as they once had in the ruins of war. She removed the crown, setting it aside with visible relief. He noticed. "You hate that thing," he said. "It pinches," she replied. "Power should not pinch." He laughed softer now. "You're different." "So are you," she said. "You no longer pretend your choices are accidents." He thought about that, about the man who had once laughed out of fear and called mercy a bad investment. "Yeah," he said. "Turns out I'm terrible at walking away." She reached out, resting her hand briefly over his, not as Empress, not as someone wounded and hidden, just as herself. "Then stay," she said, "not because you owe me, but because you choose to." Outside, the stars continued their indifferent dance. The universe, vast and stubborn, had not changed, but two people had, and somehow that had been enough. For the first time since the war, he felt finished, not ended but complete. And for the first time since power found her, she felt free enough to laugh without worrying who might hear.